Hi, welcome everybody. This is Greg Javer. Formerly, you may recognize me from the, maybe not, it's not a very well viewed podcast, but the Edward Summit podcast, and which I started earlier this year. And I've really been enjoying it. So more recently, I uh, extended an invitation to none other than Brian Trenchard-Smith to join me to spin off into a broader podcast. And certainly it's my privilege to have him here today. And I'm so grateful that he accepted. I mentioned to him, I didn't want him to feel that I was going to grill him necessarily,
But
but
well, I'm happy to be grilled. I can be fried. I can be, toasted. I can be poached. I'm available for any flavor of cuisine you wish to give me.
that's so Brian, of course, needs no introduction, but with a storied film career, many cult classics. I'll just name a few that you'll be immediately familiar with. Certainly, Turkey Shoot, The Man from Hong Kong, Siege at Fire Base Gloria, Dead End Drive-In. I could go on and on at great length, but I would encourage everybody to not only check out Brian's films if you're not overly familiar. Check out the extent of your filmography. I think maybe people who know your films from the 70s and 80s might not be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I've made 41 long forms and 43 episodes of television.
Right.
I stopped counting after making 100 trailers, and numerous, before that, countless television promos for series and movies of the week and things like that. And a few short films. A prize-winning short actually called Hospitals Don't Burn Down. You can find on YouTube for nothing. Though it is included on one of the DVDs of my work. It was a fire safety film commissioned by the Veteran Affairs Department of Australia because they were getting too many fires in their hospitals. And so I was commissioned to make a dramatized documentary about what could happen if a hospital caught fire. And I decided to make it as less than a sort of instructive, dry documentary. I made it kind of as a horror documentary, and we incinerated several, members of the nursing staff.
Right.
And a janitor. So, well, the poor janitors always get it, don't they?
They
They're always considered expendable in movies. But this is all in a good cause, and we made this 25-minute film called "Hospital Don't Burn Down." Misleading title, but actually, the crew and I christened it the Towering Infirmary as we were making it, and we did indeed set fire to 3 hospitals in the course of making it. Over a wonderful 18 nights of shooting. It's a total night shoot. Anyway, that's a little known piece of mine that I think is really quite good, still holds up today. And go to YouTube and it'll may put you off going to a hospital, but there were lessons learned, or the idea was that people would learn lessons from seeing the film, and it was became compulsory for everyone joining staff in Australian hospitals to see the film within the first few days of them joining the staff. And as a result, a number of hospitals changed their procedures. One particular lesson is do not have your non-ambulatory patients on a high floor. We showed how the hospital could be cut in half by fire, blasting out from the laundry chute on one of the middle floors. So one hospital took that to account and moved ICU from the top 4th floor to the ground floor. And then several months later, the top floor caught fire and was completely gutted. So it's probably a rare occasion that one of my films actually did some public good. It's always nice when that happens, but most people would say that Turkey Shoot did not necessarily contribute to the public good, but a lot of people like it.
I think that's a matter of taste. So they say, hospitals don't burn down. So that's interesting, of course, because the subject matter, it's a fire safety film, but realistically, the subject matter we see quite often. We see conflagrations and explosions. You like to blow things up, certainly, as you
I
said.
love to blow
And
things up.
you have,
Yeah,
of course, and well, first off, before I say this and go back to Brian, Adventures in the B movie trade. I want to make sure that everybody is very well aware of a wonderful book that came out last year and really details not only the struggles of really, I think, what persistence it takes to get into the film industry uh, in a really detailed fashion, and principles such as, you obviously don't want to turn down opportunities. You want to network. You want to, and I think it's a good primer, a good instruction manual for people who may want to try to pursue getting into the film industry. And then, of course, there's wonderful anecdotes from throughout your film career, but inclusive of the number of times, I believe 7 times, where you set yourself on fire.
yes, yes. Yeah, initially, because I wanted to try out the new fire retardant gel that Australia had invented. And initially just as for industrial purposes, but we thought, hey, we can use this in the film industry and we can start doing fire stunts without fire suits, which of course we couldn't afford fire suits in Australia. They would have to be imported and, it took a, so here you could actually protect your body with a fire retardant gel. And we pioneered that, and there's you'll see a certain amount of its use in hospitals, but don't burn down. But I had when I came across it, I wanted to try it out myself, so I set my naked arm on fire. Not for very long, I hasten to add, but I was just as an experiment. It appears in one of my early films called The Stuntmen, which was a 50-minute documentary which is sold as a TV special, all around the world. And in the big sort of fire stunt sequence, I had myself filmed, experimenting with it and thinking how long I could hold my naked arm on fire, but not very long. I stuck it in the bucket fairly quickly, but I was not hurt. So I did the other fire stunts as publicity stunts for my films, as I'd be brought, displayed to assembled media as the hottest director in town while I was on fire. And but this certainly would get you press coverage. I was in fact offered to the Johnny Carson show, with the idea being that the curtains, he would say, I'm going to bring, my next guest is the hottest director in town, and the curtains would draw, and there I would be already on fire, and I would step forward and shake his hand, and this got initial traction with the show's producers, but legal affairs freaked out, and no way. So I doubt if it ever got to Johnny's ears. Anyway, there you go, bit of 70s memorabilia.
A shame, though. A shame that
but I don't do
skit didn't
those
happen.
anymore.
Right, right.
No,
Certainly.
no. It's he.
You mentioned.
I found I learned how to better to photograph action by doing a few of the things myself.
Right. So, and action films are, of course, to a large degree, your forte, and stunt work certainly. The Man from Hong Kong, I think, I suspect you would consider that your first really large-scale production. Is that a fair estimate?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, The Stuntman, shot for $16,000, was a fairly large-scale production for the budget.
Oh, yeah.
So it has car chases, battle scenes, etc. Because those are the sort of meat and potatoes of the movie business, and you need to know how, need to see how they're done. So anyway, it was a kind of teach yourself how to shoot action while showing how action is shot. That was my premier independent production when I left, stopped being a television executive, and went out on my own with my own production company, raised 16 grand, and did this thing as a sort of proof of concept for myself as a director, and in particularly a director of action. So one of the things that I deal with the whole issue of how to get started in my book. It's, you have to, get a calling card. You have to show that you can do stuff, and then you may attract people to back you in something that is, maybe going to draw a bigger audience. So luckily, the stuntmen impressed, Raymond Chow of Golden Harvest in Hong Kong enough for him to be prepared to put up half the money for The Man from Hong Kong. And I found Australian partners to join me in the other half. It's, it's important, certainly, that you find a way to show your particular skills. Maybe your skills are with music videos. So go make one of those and show your visual expertise, your sense of rhythm, editorial expertise, etc. And you can make a music video on your iPhone. So the technology has been democratized since I first started. So the current generation have ways of bringing their talent to to people's notice more easily than in my young day.
Well, even from the technical facility that it would require to be able to edit on film, on celluloid, very different than being able to push a few buttons on a keyboard, obviously. And just knowing cameras, lenses, things of that nature. It's the technology is very lightweight and easy to use, and in today's world, it's a game changer. But yeah, I think The Man from Hong Kong. You were on your way to Hong Kong. This is a bit earlier, when you were going to meet Bruce Lee, and then Bruce Lee unfortunately passed away just before you got there.
Yeah, I think he probably died just as I was boarding the plane. And when I finally got to Hong Kong, 10 hours later, the place was in mourning. So I stuck around and instead of making a documentary about him, I made a tribute to him. Then returned the next year with my stuntman friend and colleague Grant Page, and built a 75-minute television documentary about who will succeed Bruce Lee. And Grant Page, Australia's premier stuntman, comes to Hong Kong to see who will succeed Bruce Lee. So we built it around that idea.
Right.
So this is an example of, let's say, bread and butter filmmaking in the early days. You have to keep generating content. You have to be able to, the content has to be, you have to finance it somehow, but it still has to be good enough to be broadcast. So that's, and I found that making quasi-documentary clip shows where you show lots of extracts from movies that that deal with the subject that you're focused on, Hong Kong cinema, and it was a way to fill 75 minutes without having to spend too much money. But we flew to Hong Kong. We shot for 5-6 days, including Grant doing some stunts. But that was a way in which I could make a TV special and get my money back out of just the local sale.
Right. Subsequently, Raymond Chow's gamble was that Wong Yu would be the next Bruce Lee. That was sort of his gamble, which didn't quite turn out that way.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, in a way, Bruce's style, while it had, obviously, he was capable of doing classical kung fu. What he was particularly good at was was pretty unpleasant street fighting, and he was, and he used that to great success, I think, in a number of his films, particularly ones that were subsequent to The Man from Hong Kong. You see films like The Man Called Tiger, which actually he made before Man from Hong Kong, but a number of others where he uses more street fighting techniques. But I think every star has their period of heat, and heat eventually wanes. He rose in the very late 60s at Shaw Brothers and became enormously popular with one-armed boxer, one-armed swordsman, and so forth. And then moved to Raymond Chow's company. In fact, broke his contract with Shaw, and had to go and make films in Taiwan because there were lawsuits against him in Hong Kong for breaking his contract. So, and no doubt he had every good reason to break his contract, because you never saw any, as a Shaw contract player, you never saw much benefit from the big successes that that you delivered, because of your star charisma. So anyway, he had a period where he was doing well, and then Bruce came along suddenly, and kind of he peaked, became the number one, and so it seemed that Wong Yu would then regain the top perch. But by then there were a lot of other contenders vying for that, I think perhaps because he was a Taiwan-based filmmaker, and he is a good director in his own right. But if he had been able to remain in Hong Kong, he might have he might have done better than he did. But he still had a long and distinguished career. But he never quite recaptured the top spot. Funnily enough, I found that when we were asking Hong Kong producers in 1973 who would be the next Bruce Lee, and someone said, well, there's this young guy who's just done a film, hasn't done particularly well. His name is Jackie Chan. So I don't think he's going to be the next Bruce Lee. That was uniformly, for all the people we spoke to, no, he's not going to make it. And hey,
right.
Look, the rest is history, shall we say?
Right. Well, so, certainly he, obviously revolutionized the martial arts film. I think people were predicating that notion on Jackie Chan's not the stalwart leading man who would appear in a big costume epic like a Chang Cheh film like One Armed Swordsman. Nonetheless, before we move off Man from Hong Kong, you met, I'm a huge Shaw addict, so I'm just curious. I'm naturally curious. You met Run Shaw.
yes.
I'm just curious, what was his demeanor like? I mean, he was obviously, a legendary figure going all the way back to in Hong Kong cinema, going all the way, not only Hong Kong cinema, but Eastern cinema, going all the way back to the 1950s.
Yes, I mean, he and his brother Run Me Shaw. They acquired a few small theaters in Malaysia initially and built it into a huge exhibition empire, which of course naturally they created a vertically integrated entertainment complex. So they owned the theaters, they owned the distribution company, and they had the production company, and they would also acquire films that were already made by smaller companies. So but they became the dominant, distribution exhibition power throughout Asia, and he built that up, over many years. And his vision just said, we have got to make it Hollywood East. So we're going to take the Warner Brothers logo, and make it SB instead of WB. And we're going to have a kind of 20th Century Fox like fanfare that makes it sound like it's a grand parade of the army, and we're going to make films that are colorful and widescreen at all times. So that was a wise business decision that he made. really in the late 50s, and it paid off. Eventually, it took to the 70s before any other consortium could summon the money to and create a couple of vehicles that really went, that clicked at the box office, and then all of a sudden that was a game changer. And obviously, Raymond Chow's ability to produce in Taiwan as well as in Hong Kong really helped. But back to Run Run, I shot an interview with him during my visit, ostensibly to made a documentary about Bruce Lee, and I found him to be a very poised and charming man. Not, he was a man of few words, short and to the point, but he was gracious. He had a tall, blonde secretary who spoke both, Cantonese. Well, maybe she has. I think she spoke both Cantonese and Mandarin, but she was American, and so she was like his front of house secretary, and periodically came in and out with little notes, and most particularly brought him a small bowl of food, a little bowl of something, some rice with something on it. In fact, he offered us some food as well. I don't think we actually had it, but he pointed out to us at that point that in the East, it is much, people eat maybe five. Well, I guess if they can afford to, but his point was, it is healthier to not eat big meals, but maybe eat 4 or 5 small meals throughout the day, and maybe even 6. And so, maybe it is pollen season here, and I am, I'm a borderline phlegm factory as a result. The pollen literally is covering the boards on the deck outside the house with little yellow spots. So if I snuffle, it is okay. For these reasons, probably more detail than you really needed. But anyway, Run was very, very gracious, and but I want to point out that little detail that he gave us, little sort of nutritional exercise, nutritional information when some food was served to him, which obviously probably every 2 or 3 hours he got a tiny little bowl of something.
Sure.
But he lived to a very ripe old age,
right?
And so yeah.
It was a good dietary tip, perhaps, because I believe he just passed away in 2014. I believe he was either near or slightly beyond 100 years old. Yeah. So
I think so. Certainly, either dead on. Yeah. So good for him. And I don't know whether it changed my dietary habits any, but though I think I'm eating healthier living in Oregon than I did living in LA. I'm a happy refugee from LA,
good.
Living with well water from an aquifer, deer that come to my door every day asking for apples, and the air is clean, and
right.
Just to be surrounded by green trees. It's good. It's good for the human spirit, let's say.
Indeed. If you watch Trailers from Hell, if you're familiar with the Trailers from Hell site, Brian is one of the contributors there, and I've noticed that on numerous episodes where the deer are standing in the backdrop, almost as if they're
yes.
right while you're shooting out in the yard. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
You also mentioned in I think, jumping off Man from Hong Kong again, but you mentioned in the Trailer from Hell episode about the Man from Hong Kong that you shot one dialogue scene and then one action scene and then one dialogue scene and then one action scene. And then as I was reading through Adventures in the B-Movie Trade, when I got to the part where you said your eureka moment as a 13-year-old was Vertigo, I thought it made me actually think back on that statement, because Hitchcock structures Vertigo in much the same fashion. There's a dialogue scene, then not an action scene, but rather a suspense scene shot in utter silence, and it varies back and forth entirely throughout the film. I'm not saying perhaps that you subconsciously were thinking of that, but more importantly, I saw Vertigo for the first time when I was about 14 or 15, and it made a huge impression on me as well. As time has worn on, the film changes as you obviously mature. I'm curious, what do you think now about Vertigo?
Well, I still love it. I it mesmerized me as a 13-year-old. Didn't understand all its dark undercurrents, but well, I could tell it was dark, but I didn't quite, or didn't understand the full depth of James Stewart's obsession, let's say, or how utterly wrong his obsession was. But it was Hitchcock's use of color, his ways of building suspense, his stylized dream sequences, all those, the beautiful style that he brought to it, and he shot it in VistaVision. I mean, it would have been amazing to see, when there were VistaVision projectors that would actually also projected the film. In a very few theaters, they projected the film as VistaVision was shot, horizontally through the projector, so that there were more pixels, or there was more, a larger frame being projected onto the screen. But recently I saw it blown up to 70 millimeter, an old 70 millimeter, well, not blown up, but transferred from the original, I think 8 perf VistaVision negative. The screening was at the Hollywood Theatre in Portland, the historic theatre there that was built in the 20s, and it was the home of all the Cinerama movies when they came to, all the 70 mil movies when they came to Portland. But so to see it there in stereo was great, but unfortunately there was a break in the print, and so we had to wait 5 minutes for to be repaired, and then the reel started again, which kind of broke the mood and the momentum of the piece. But it was great to see it on that giant screen there, close to what people in the premiere theaters in its original release would have experienced. The interesting thing is, we went with people, including a relative, a woke girl in her 30s. She absolutely hated it for its sexism, for the objectification of women. So I mean, all of these things kind of went over my head, which may mean I'm a dinosaur. I recognized, James Stewart was a good example of men behaving badly, and we all do, because but I wasn't aware it was that offensive to women. So there may be members of your listenership who might share that opinion. So, but the whole idea of films is that it can provoke different opinions. The smartest films can provoke different opinions in its audience. So all of that is good. That's what movies are meant to make you think. But anyway, so I've always been, I've always loved the film, but I guess if I want to see it again, I want to see it with people who've never seen it before, on the biggest TV screen possible, or another 70 millimeter reprise with a packed house. That's how I would like to see it. But his use of color, the way he the music really works with the images, and just the way he built the story very, very cleverly. It was just a knockout, and it convinced me, or I realized that obviously this was a job that grown-ups did. And in 5 years' time, when I leave school at 18, I'm going to have to get a job because that's what grown-ups do. This is a job. People get paid to make these things. That's what I'll do. Simple. Okay, problem solved. But little did I know that it's not as simple as that. But I then had to set about learning the trade and getting into it.
Right. And so as you were kind of cutting your teeth, so to speak, you were also cutting a lot of trailers and continue to do so. And it makes me think that watching a lot of your films, there's a real concentrated effort, or a concentrated effect rather, that makes me think that the process of boiling trailers down to those bare essentials really infused itself into your action scenes and into your films generally.
You're absolutely right. Pace has always been important to me. I guess right from an early film and television going age, I wanted things to move along. I wanted to, get to the next point. Keep me swept along by the narrative and don't dawdle. And I was certainly influenced by trailers growing up. To see a film in essentially reduced to 2.5 to 3 minutes of its good bits, or the good bits they allowed you to see, because all trailers had to have a G rating. In England, it was the U certificate, Universal Exhibition, as opposed to A certificate, more suitable for adult audiences, or X certificate, no one under 16 admitted. That was what I grew up in England. Anyway, they would, in every double bill that I would go to in local movie theaters, there would be a newsreel, sometimes a cartoon, and trailers for next week's films. And I sometimes would come in at the time when they're just showing the trailers before the main feature, and see the main feature, the supporting feature. Then the program would start again. They didn't empty the cinema halls in England at that time. They had continuous projection. The shows just rotated around, and so within 5 minutes of the programming ending, it would start again. And sometimes I would stay that extra 15-20 minutes, see the newsreel again, the cartoon again, then the trailers again, because I found them interesting. I think I say, why did they choose those bits? And sometimes I would see the films, and then I would say, I see, but they didn't choose that bit. They didn't choose that bit. And so all of that intrigued me as a kid growing up. So I was automatically drawn towards trailers. So when I got my first real job cutting news at Channel 10 in Sydney, I looked at the station promos that they were making, and I thought, well, I think they're a bit dull. So with all this sort of modesty of an ambitious young 20-year-old, I went to the station management and said, I think these could be livelier, could you give me a shot at making a couple? And so they said, oh, fine, because that was the way Australia was in those days. It was, have a go, mate, okay, you volunteer, you fuck up, we'll get someone else. But so they gave me a shot, and I concentrated on finding the sex and violence elements of the Sunday night movie that I was making, the promo for, and this was quite successful. So I, and then a rival network, got me and brought me over, and I began to make, I stopped cutting news and just made promos, and that ultimately led to them wanting me to, wanting me to continue to do so, and I would only do so if they allowed me the opportunity also to make programs, and that's how I made the lateral move from promotion to production within a TV network, and became, the special projects producer and promo maker, and that's how I made it. It's not everybody's method, but it basically drew upon one of the essential things that you need to know as a filmmaker. You have to understand editing. You have to understand that editing is really the grammar and syntax of filmmaking. You have to understand structure. You have to understand sequential linkage. And film is a language, and you just need to understand how to put it together. So if you have got experience as an editor, you have a major area of education covered should you want to become a director. So that was what I did. So for all would-be filmmakers, study editing, most important.
Right, and it's really evident. I watched Drive Hard a couple of weeks ago, and although you're working with lower budgets, your background as an editor, there's so many setups in your films because, again, you're constructing them in a more intricate fashion given your background as an editor, but just so many quick cutaways and things like that. It really does give your films this almost blistering pace, and that's what I thought of as I was watching Drive Hard. I thought it's a funny buddy movie concept, but it's clipping along at such a pace that it's kind of breathtaking.
Well, I think sometimes you have to move things at a pace that people don't have time to think too much about the essential absurdity of the subject matter. But that's not to disparage the subject matter necessarily,
Right.
because we all, we can enjoy absurdity. And I have made a few films that I would call, that would fall into the absurdist cinema genre, and the Leprechaun in Vegas and Leprechaun in Space being two, where you embrace the essential absurdity of the concept and run with it and try to make it as visually and entertaining as the budget will allow, and
Right.
pack it with as many jokes. I mean, a good joke is not necessarily expensive, and
Right.
we got a lot of humor out of rhyme and limericks in the Leprechaun pictures, and by by playing me this trick, I'm gonna chop off your, and then there was suddenly he brings the axe down between the man's legs, just missing, with a loud whack, where you would normally hear the word dick. Anyway, just the little finer points for
Right.
for those studying these things and these great cultural artifacts that I've
Right.
somehow given birth to.
That reminds me of one of my favorite moments is the gentleman wearing the I have to be very careful because I'll get it wrong, but wearing the Cunning Stunts t-shirts in Death Cheaters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Inadvertent spoonerism, you got to watch out for that. In fact, while trying to defend the title Cunning Stunts to my distributor, and which was my intended title and hence the T-shirt, I inadvertently committed the Spoonerism, and he said, there you see, people will, so, okay, we're trying to make this for the broadest possible audience.
Yeah.
I accept that. Okay, so we will change it to something that is more mainstream commercial. But the T-shirt stayed, and the Spoonerism possibility is available for all those with warped and twisted minds.
Right.
Whenever they see them wearing those T-shirts. And I wish I still had a copy of that T-shirt. But after 1976, they tend to sort of, they tend to disappear.
That could be
I'd be quite proud to be wearing it.
It would be a popular T-shirt in today's world. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Yeah. well, Grant Page, based upon that, Grant Page started his own. The umbrella company for his stunt work was known as Cunning Stunts. So the name lives on,
right.
And I'm sure more T-shirts were made, but mine is gone.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we're coming up. This time flies. I can't believe we've been talking this long already, but we're coming up on the hour. A couple things I wanted to make sure that I mentioned before we wrap this up. You wrote a novel a couple of years ago, Alice Through the Multiverse, and it was based on a screenplay, the unproduced screenplay of yours.
Yeah. Originally, I'd written a screenplay called The Executioner's Daughter, and it was optioned twice for good money, but we could never get Keira Knightley or Scarlett Johansson or any of the sort of young femmes du jour, 2008, who had the box office wattage in the international market to carry a movie when, particularly in international markets, they need a male co-lead. And indeed, there was a great part for a guy, but really it's about her, the executioner's daughter, who, due to, let's say, finds herself in the 21st century, and gets caught up in basically a spy drama in which she is going to be, which she is considered to be a mentally ill person who could be used as a patsy and a false flag terrorist atrocity to disguise who is really behind it. But they don't take into account that she might be from the 16th century, or in their opinion, batshit crazy. Who cares about her? She's not going to, be able to stop us using her. But she's a resourceful girl. Alice is a resourceful girl. However, many people liked it. Many thought it was really interesting. This is before Game of Thrones, but it was the screenplay was kind of a Game of Thrones before its time. Meets Jason Bourne on Freaky Friday due to a sort of a past life swap. So you have both the 21st century girl suddenly thrust into a 16th century conspiracy, and the 16th century girl, her subsequent descendant, thrust into a 21st century conspiracy. So I mixed two genres because I thought that would be interesting for the audience, and obviously people agreed. But we could never get it financed because the stars are protected by their management, which protects them from independent productions that might not actually succeed. They might get paid, but then if the film doesn't get released and goes straight to video or something like that, that damages the stars' purchasing power, let's say, and when roles come up, and so no agent wants to recommend their star, take this independently financed film that'll be shot in Europe, and it'll find distribution in the United States, and then it doesn't. So it's, risk-averse agents naturally saying, forget it. Someone has to offer us a truckload of money, and we have to be seen, and there has to be a guarantee of distribution in the United States. And we could never put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And I understand, the laws of the marketplace. So eventually the project languished and the rights returned to me. So I let it sit for a while, but it still gnawed my liver because I thought it was a good story that was, would sweep people along. So I wrote it as a novel, and it just had a lot of good reviews and keeps selling copies. And people who buy Adventures in the B-movie trade, where I talk about it, about the evolution of the executioner's daughter to Alice through the multiverse, because it is a parallel universe story, so people who read Adventures, sometimes say, oh, what else has he written? Oh, this is fun. And then by about page 3, a lot of people just really want to keep on reading. So they try it out on Kindle. And by the way, Kindle is a good way to look at adventures. If you haven't got the $20 to buy the paperback, but you have $9.99 to buy the Kindle, it plays well on the computer and all the pictures are in color. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, of course, it's free. I think I get 1/4 cent per page read, but which is fine. I just want the book read. I want all my books read, so it's a book that you can snack on for 3 minutes in a meal break, or when your boss is not looking, or it's a book you can read in whole chunks. I mentioned Kindle Unlimited because I track the sales, and there's on the KDP Amazon site that I log into to look how my daily sales are going. I look at Kindle Unlimited and I see, a collection of people or one person read over 400 pages today. And then tomorrow, 500 pages. Next day, 200 pages. Yeah. So people can dip in and out of it who are in Kindle Unlimited when they feel like a snack, let's say. All of that is good. So those are the 3 ways in which people can access the book. And they can get Alice on Kindle for $5 too. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's been an interesting exploration of the publishing world.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, you can get. I'll link in the description box to both of those books. And incidentally, I'm sure you noticed it, but you've got a near perfect Amazon review score for Adventures in the B-movie trade. I think a 4.8 out of 5, which no one will ever satisfy everyone. That's an astonishingly high review score, and I think very well warranted. The book is absolutely loaded with great anecdotes, like I said earlier, and a lot of biographical information about yourself. So if you're really seriously interested in the career of Brian Trenchard-Smith, you absolutely have got to read that book.
Well, I hope you are. It's very kind of you. Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've given your listeners a lot of homework. Now, is there you have one last question for me?
I do indeed. Okay. What are you working on now? What can we expect next?
Well, I'm currently working on a number of different things. I mean, I have various projects that I would like to see happen in the post-COVID world, and maybe I would certainly like to direct them. But the fact is, despite that I'm fit and hale-hearty and at the height of my creative powers, I have committed the unpardonable sin in Hollywood of being 75, and ageism being what it is probably prudent of a studio to say, oh, we'll get somebody younger. And there are loads of really talented directors coming up. So I may end up just being a producer on some of these things. But I have I have drafted the Bible for Alice Through the Multiverse as a streaming series, where I've outlined, what would happen in 3 seasons, basically. I, with my writing partner, have devised a crime, a Euro crime spy drama called Blowback, which is female driven. It's, and it exists in both screenplay form and as a 2-hour pilot for a streaming series. Could be one or the other. Could be shot in Asia, could be shot in Europe. It could be shot in any country in the world, but because of the amount of because I like to blow stuff up, because of the amount of physical action and so forth, it's probably better made where production costs are lower, and it also justifies the amount of mayhem that would probably not be allowed to happen in America or the UK or Canada, but could happen in Slovenia or the Philippines or somewhere else. So Blowback is a fun piece with interesting characters and a splendidly villainous Russian mob guy, Marco, who has he is engagingly vile in every respect, and we had great fun writing him, Dennis and I. So there's that. I'm going to sort of help my writing partner Dennis Pratt in publishing one of his novels, or a series of novellas. So his first one that he just sent me a draft of is called The Shooter and the Kid. It's kind of female mob enforcer meets 23-year-old virgin accountant. Sparks fly, and so do the bullets. So that would be a 150-page novella, which I would dangle out there to any sensible person who wanted to make it as a movie, because it's a good sex and John Wick kind of a movie, and so there's that, and I'm also spending time trying to be a bit of a cinema historian, and so I do Trailers from Hell, as you know. I'm just in the process of writing a trailer from hell on Atomic Blonde, a favorite film of mine. Who can resist Charlize Theron beating the shit out of men behaving badly? I mean, what's not to like? And then I'm going to do an extensive blog on a 1929 2-strip Technicolor movie called Mamba, which was, one of the, it was the first color, well, the beginning of the sound era. Most studios concentrated on musicals, and shot in the studio. This company went and used what is now the Universal backlot and recreated 1914 East Africa, and it was kind of, it is a really interesting piece, and the color is it's 2-strip, not 3-strip, but it's a rare artifact, this film, and the one print that survived, because it was shot on nitrate stock, and all that nitrate stock was destroyed. And in fact, the original negative of this film was part of the nitrate stock that was used in the fire in Gone with the Wind, in the burning of Atlanta. They got a whole lot of nitrate stock that needed to be destroyed, included the negative of Mamba. But one surviving print existed in a warehouse in Australia, and intrepid Australians caused it to be resurrected, and ultimately, with the aid of UCLA and other parties, restored. And it will come out next year as a Blu-ray, as an early example of Hollywood's use of a sound talkie that didn't have musical numbers in 1929. Anyway, you see, cinema history is important. I mean, cinema is an important adjunct to our culture, and we should preserve cinema history, and we're losing too much of it right now. And studios are sort of junking things, and that everything has value. And so I'm glad that Mamba, which isn't a great film, but it's really interesting to analyze it from a social history point of view, all its attitudes, its prejudices, its assumptions, and so forth. Anyway, so I'm going to do an extensive piece on that. So I try to keep as busy as I can, but also I like going out and shooting deer with my phone. Look, hunters can hunt. That's fine. I'll hunt with the camera, so that's I'm lucky that I'm able to have a comfortable semi-retirement where I can dabble in the things that interest me.
That's great. That's great, Brian.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to hearing a lot more about Mamba, certainly, or Mamba, and certainly any other projects that come down the pike. I'll be certainly first in line. And again, it was a great pleasure to talk with you here today. And I want to encourage everybody to get out there, and you'll find so many of Brian's classic cult films on Blu-ray, on DVD, with commentary tracks in great condition. So there's a lot of content out there that's pretty much immediately accessible to you. And I encourage you, again, to go seek it out. And anything you wanted to say in closing, Brian?
No, I think you've covered it admirably. And I will say, please, everybody, get vaccinated.
Vaccinated, indeed. Yes. I'm one shot in. I have my second shot on April 28th. Right.
Yeah. And I'm fully vaccinated, been made safe for democracy. But it's what have you got to lose? Don't listen to the paranoia.
Right.
The sooner we get everybody with vaccinated, the sooner we can put this thing behind us. Though obviously, there are going to be more flus, more COVIDs, more more viruses that will mutate, and we just have to be sensible and public spirited about it when it happens. So that's my advice to anyone who cares to listen. Get vaccinated. Keep wearing a mask for a few more months when you meet strangers, going to shops and things like that. It just helps. It's a nuisance. It's I know I'm sick of it, but just a few more months and we'll have herd immunity. And but where there may be another variant that may have cause us to have to remask again for a period. But the sooner we can get the whole country vaccinated, and I think the government's doing a very good job of doing that right now. And then we'll get back to normal. I did see my first two movies for a year over a year, I have not been to a movie house. And so as soon as I'd done my 2 weeks after the second jab, I went to, Godzilla versus Kong, which I thought was, a really good, they got it right this time. Never mind the humans, concentrate on the creatures, for God's sake, and do them in daylight, and do them with extended shots and not quick cuts. And they got it right this time. Then I went and saw, because I hadn't got my full fix. I really needed to. So I went and saw Nobody with Bob Odenkirk, which was a kind of low budget John Wick, but yeah, he is such a solid presence. He made it all very watchable, and it was a fun piece of nonsense. Good to see Christopher Lloyd using a shotgun, all sorts of other good things like that.
Great.
Anyway, nice to talk to you.
You
Enough
as well.
time to go. And thank you for anyone who is still listening. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Brian. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.